for Where Hollywood Hides, here's Bob and Suzanne.
Chicken joke!
I'm Mrs. Cleaver.
From Television City in Hollywood.
Boy, the way Glenn Miller plays.
I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
We're on a mission from God.
Run, Forrest, run!
We can rebuild him. We have the technology.
You had me at hello.
Nanu.
Baby, you're the great.
I'm not going to be ignored.
Here comes the judge.
Go ahead. Make my day.
I got nowhere else to go.
Small cowbell.
That fashion.
There's anything wrong with that. You can't handle the truth.
I'm not an actor. I'm a movie star.
That's the story of my life. No respect. I don't get no respect at all.
I'm the dude.
I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
And now for something completely different.
There's no business like show business, like no business I know.
Welcome to Where Hollywood Hides. This is podcast episode number 42. My name is Bob McCullough.
And my name is Suzanne Herrera-McCullough. Happy spring, Bob. You are so peppy.
I am. I feel like Pinky Lee today.
Maybe you've had too much coffee.
Maybe.
I love my coffee.
That does happen. You know, I've been waiting a long time for today's interview. We're talking to a friend of mine from high school, Hawk Koch.
The famous Hawk Koch.
He is a preeminent, I want to use the word mogul. He'd probably be embarrassed, but if you look up the word mogul in a dictionary, you'll find a picture of Hawk Koch. He got into the business very, very young, almost as a child, and he has risen to the preeminent position, just over 30 major motion pictures. He was, in 2012, the president of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. You don't get bigger than that.
You know, I was doing some research on him, and you mentioned 2012. The Board of Governors in 2012 of the Academy green-lighted the Academy Museum, which is going to be a very big deal. It's going to be on the corner of Wilshire and Fairfax.
Right at the May Company building.
That's the building they took over, and it's going to be quite impressive.
I can't wait to see it.
They are going to have 10 million photographs, 165,000 screenplays. Do you think our screenplays will be in there?
I sure hope so.
50,000 posters, 20,000 production and costume design drawings, and collections of film legends from Cary Grant, Katharine Hepburn, Alfred Hitchcock. The list goes on. It is going to be such a great thing to go see. They say it's going to be right up there with the Getty Museum in terms of tourism.
And I think if you go to the Academy website, you'll have an opportunity to contribute to the fundraising effort, which Hawk Koch has been leading for the last couple of years. Because it takes a lot of money to put this kind of thing together. And it's certainly going to be something right up there with the best of museums in the world. You
know, the Academy, since 1930, has been collecting and preserving all this movie-related material. It's going to be very impressive, and I can't wait to see it.
I want to be there on day one.
Hope my picture's there. After all, I am almost famous.
Well, hey, before we talk to Hawk, I want to remind everybody to go to our website at wherehollywoodhides.com.
And to buy our book, Where Hollywood Hides, Santa Barbara, Celebrities in Paradise.
We have it right there on the website. You get free shipping.
It's a good time to shop for that. It's Father's Day, graduation.
It's the ideal gift and a real collector's item. You can also find it at Amazon.com. And if you go to the website at wherehollywoodhides.com, you'll find lots of Amazon links on the website and opportunities to buy anything that Amazon offers. And as you know, they have everything in the world. Now listen, talking to Hawk Koch is going to be a unique experience. This is a guy who started as a very lowly kind of set assistant, what we call a gopher, back in the 60s. And he worked his way up to the top, involved in major motion pictures like Marathon Man, Chinatown, Wayne's World, Peggy Sue Got Married, Heaven Can Wait, The Way We Were with Barbra Streisand, one of your favorites, and Rosemary's Baby. He has worked with directors like Sidney Pollack, Roman Polanski, John Schlesinger, and Francis Ford Coppola. So,
let's go see what Hawk has to say.
Well, Hawk, let's get started. I think our listeners are going to be fascinated by your story. The fact that you and I go back to grammar school, we will set aside, and we will try to be as professional as possible here.
Okay.
Well, you have had an incredible career and still have a phenomenal career, and your profile in the Hollywood industry, I think, is unparalleled. Tell us about how it all started for you. what your childhood was like, and
I never saw my father very much because in those days they worked 6 days a week, and I'm almost 5 years old, and my mother drives my sister and I from Los Angeles to Durango, Colorado, because my father is, in quotes, because what do I know at 4.5, making a movie. And I go up there, and we stay in a cabin. Think of Laurel and Hardy, those kind of cabins. And the next morning, my father takes me out puts me in a car, and I was very shy, and I always hid in my mother's dress. You know, like you put your face in your mother's dress so that you can't see anybody, and you think they can't see you. That's how shy I was. And so I cried as I got in the car that next day because I had never been with my dad kind of in that way. And we drove, and I'm kind of frumpy and everything, and all of a sudden, about 20 minutes later, I see cowboys and Indians and teepees and horses. Yeah, there were some trucks and there were some cameras, but I was into the cowboys and the Indians and the cavalry. So I got out of the car and kind of ran, and there was this man, this Indian, who I don't know why I wasn't scared of, and he put me on his knee, and I felt, wow, and he was telling me some great story of, you know, the Native American. Turned out to be, it was Ricardo Montalban, who had nothing to do with being a Native American. He was dressed as an Indian for this movie. And then a guy came up to me on a horse and said, have you ever been on a horseback ride before? And I said, no, but this was the most exciting day of my life. And so he took me and put me in front of him and rode me around for me it was like all day. It was probably, 30 seconds or something. And when I got home that night after having the greatest day of my life, my father said to my mother, guess who gave him his first horseback ride? And my mother said, who? And my father said, Clark Gable.
Oh, my goodness.
That's a true story, and that was a movie called Across the Wide Missouri that Clark Gable was in, and it was directed by a man named Wild Bill Wellman.
Sure.
William Wellman directed the first Academy Award-winning movie, Wings. And so, I didn't know it at the time, but his son, Bill Wellman Jr., and at the time I was Howard Koch Jr., he was a few years older, and we played all around the movie set and had the greatest time for a few days. So that was my start in the industry, and I think I knew then that what I wanted to do was create fantasies that everybody could, go into a dark theater and really enjoy, and so that's where it started.
If only every day on the set was as much fun.
Can you tell our audience who your father was?
Yeah, my father's name was Howard W. Koch, not Howard Koch, not the man who wrote Casablanca. It's Howard W. Koch. And he started out like me as a nothing, worked his way up, second assistant, first assistant director to people like Mervyn LeRoy and Clarence Brown and Busby Berkeley and Joe Mankiewicz on Julius Caesar. And then he became a producer of what I'll call B movies in the 50s. It was, in those days, when you went to a movie theater, you saw the good movie and the second feature. And so he did those for a few years, and then he started directing, and he really liked that, and so he produced and directed some Mavericks and Sugarfoots, and then did a TV series that was really the forerunner of Miami Vice. It was called Surfside 6, and a Hawaii show that was before the big Hawaii 5-0. This was called Hawaiian Eye. So he was the forerunner. They just weren't big hits. And then in 1960, he had the opportunity. In 1 week, he was offered to be a partner with a man named Quinn Martin, who was the producer of The Untouchables and The Fugitive and The FBI and all these huge series. And Quinn wanted him to partner up with him. And the other person who asked him in the same week was a man named Francis Albert Sinatra. And,
that guy.
And Frank asked my dad if he would run his movie company. Well, my dad chose to run Frank's company. So in 1960, my dad became head of Frank Sinatra's company, and they produced some pretty good movies, including The Manchurian Candidate. And then in 1964, I'm going as quickly as I can, he was asked to be the head of production for Paramount, and in '64 he moved into Paramount Studios, and he stayed there until he passed away in 2001.
It was there. It was there at Paramount that I worked with him on.
Yeah, you worked with him on Hollywood Wives, right?
Yeah, we had a great time.
And he produced some, after being head of the studio for a few years, he produced some great movies, including the original Odd Couple with Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau, and Ghost, big hit movie, Airplane, which is still playing everywhere. And while he was there, he produced 10 Oscar shows. And he was, I'm very proud to say, he was president of the Motion Picture Academy in 1977, and I became president of the Motion Picture Academy in 2012. So I'm the only second generation president of the Motion Picture Academy.
Let's talk about how that all comes to pass. So your dad is in the business, and you're going to, I think, a very unique high school.
Yeah.
And
a year below us, if you remember, Bob, were a few pretty good Ricky Dreyfuss and Albert Einstein, who became Albert Brooks.
Bonnie Franklin.
Bonnie Franklin, right? I mean, we had David Anson, who was in our class, was the critic for Newsweek, the film critic for Newsweek for forever, and now is running the LA Film Festival, Los Angeles International Film.
Well, there's no doubt that our experience at Beverly Hills High School was unique, and that generation of student was unique because so many people came out of it and went into the industry and wound up in very successful careers. So let's go back to, you're in high school and you're on sets, you've got access to the whole Hollywood experience through your dad. How did you actually make a career out of that? Because not everybody can follow in their parents' footsteps successfully.
Well, I actually, I didn't start that way because I was going to UCLA when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, and I had been a huge Kennedy supporter. I had worked down at the LA Convention Center in 1960, hoping he'd get the nomination, and then I worked for his election, even though I was 14. When he was assassinated, I really, really couldn't handle it, and I decided to quit school. And honestly, I wanted to leave the United States. I was really upset. And I was lucky enough to get a job in the mailroom of a booking agent in England who booked American rock acts into England, as well as people like Sinatra into Royal Albert Hall. That's how I met him, through my father and through Frank. And so I went over to England, and I got a job. I was making £12 a week, which was about $20 a week. And I lived in a tiny little flat in London. And after a few weeks, he said, well, you're good enough to get out of the mailroom, and all of these young rock acts that I'm bringing over, I think they relate much more to you as an 18-year-old than they will to this old British guy. So you're going to pick all these acts up at Heathrow Airport. You're going to get them to their hotel. You're going to get them to, in America, we had Shindig and Hullabaloo. Well, in England, they had Ready, Steady, Go and Thank Your Lucky Stars were the television shows then.
And what year are we talking about here?
This is 1964. This is the British explosion.
The British invasion.
Well, as it's called, being in the right place at the right time, huh?
Exactly. I was very lucky, and even though I was making $20 a week, I now had an expense account to take these rock acts to the first discotheque in London. It was in Paris. It was called New Jimmy's, and here it was called the Ad Lib. It was right off Leicester Square, and you went up a freight elevator, and nobody knew where you were going except there was a guard out front. And in there were all of the British groups, the Beatles, the Stones, Marianne Faithfull, Dusty Springfield, Peter and Gordon, the Hollies, you name it. They were there every night. And I was bringing in Leslie Gore with her, who we just lost, who was a friend of mine, with her young music producer, Quincy Jones. I was bringing in the Supremes and Marvin Gaye and the Ronettes.
What an exciting time.
It was amazing. It was an unbelievable time. And then this man I was working for, he owned the Dave Clark Five. And the Dave Clark Five in 1964 were, for those of you who were around then, were as big as the Beatles. They sold 7 million albums in 3 months in the summer of '64. And they were going to do a U.S. tour, 48 cities in 52 days. My mentor, my boss, Harold Davison, said, I'd like you to go on the tour and be a roadie with them. And wow. So I was going back to the United States with the Dave Clark Five, and we played, well, as I said, 48 cities. We played the New York Paramount with the Shirelles and Jay and the Americans. In St. Louis, we played with Chuck Berry. In Birmingham, we played with Roy Orbison. I mean, and everybody then, we all danced and loved that music. So I got to see it all and work as a roadie.
Did you have an appreciation at the time for, gosh, I guess nothing less than the cultural impact of what you were living through?
I don't know if I could have put it, if I was that conscious. What I knew is I was in the right place at the right time, and I was getting to see history being made. I had always loved history, and I felt like I was in the middle of history. When I finished the tour, I was exhausted, and I decided to stay home. And I said to my dad, who was head of Paramount, that I want to go in the movie business. I loved rock and roll, but I really wanted to go in the movie business. And he helped me get a job on a movie called This Property is Condemned. Sidney Pollack it was his second movie. Now, Sidney Pollack went on to win Academy Award for Out of Africa. He directed Tootsie. We did The Way We Were together. I mean, he's a huge director. And it was starring Natalie Wood and a young actor, believe it or not, in his second film, Robert Redford. And so I went down to Mississippi to be what today they'd call a production assistant. And I was there for about 8 weeks in pre-production, and when the first day of shooting happened, the first AD quit. He was an older man, and he had a bad leg, and he couldn't get around, so he quit, and the second became the first. And this is 1965 now, and they needed a second assistant director, and they said, well, this kid knows what he's doing, you be the second. So I said, wow. So it was great, and on day one, I'm the second AD.
Again, right place, right time.
You're a lucky kid.
I'm lucky, but I also had 15 years experience on movie sets.
Yeah.
So when they said, go get Natalie Wood, I didn't walk. I ran to base camp and got Natalie Wood. And I said, we're ready for you. And she said, I'll be out in a few minutes. And I went, well, we're ready now. The cameraman said the light's good. And for some reason, she looked at me and said, okay. And she walked me up, or I walked her up to the set. And she went in front of the camera, and everybody said, how did you get Natalie Wood out of her trailer? She never comes out of her trailer. And I said, well, I don't know. I kind of told her the truth.
For our listeners who have no clue about what a real production schedule is like, describe the urgency of running to get Natalie Wood and why you felt the need to hustle.
Well, you have a certain amount of days to make a movie. Now, when you go to a movie theater or watch on television, you think, they did it in order, or that we didn't. And you only have a certain amount of light during the day, and what you do, think of it like a jigsaw puzzle. And when it's all done, it looks beautiful, and you don't see all the tiny little pieces it took to put together. But that's how you make a movie. Day one is not necessarily the first scene in the movie. It's when you're on location, you have to do somewhere between 2 pages of a screenplay to maybe 4 pages. On a television show, you might be doing 8 or 10 pages of whatever that screenplay is in a day. So you've got to get everybody there, and you've got to be ready. Everybody here says it's hurry up and wait. But we do. We hurry up as quick as we can to get the camera ready and the lighting ready and everything ready, and then sometimes you have to wait for the perfect light, or sometimes you have to wait for the actors, or rehearsal with the director, and that's your day, and you've usually got from 7 in the morning till 7 at night to get it done.
And basically, the adage "time is money" was never more true than on a movie set.
That's correct.
And it all seems to fall upon people like the ADs and the production assistants and the director. Get it done, because you've got a studio and producers standing around looking at their wristwatches, seeing $60,000 a minute tick off.
Was Natalie Wood already a star in her own right?
She was huge. She was the star of the movie. And this young actor, Robert Redford, it was his second movie. So yes, Natalie had already been in Gypsy and West Side Story, In Love with a Proper Stranger. She had been in with James Dean. She had been in A Rebel Without a Cause. And actually, as a little girl, she had been in Miracle of 34th Street.
That's
she played the little girl.
That's right.
So no, Natalie was the star. She was as big as then as maybe Angelina Jolie is today.
So when you got so you got your break to step into the Directors Guild and become a second AD very young.
Right. But what happened, Bob, is about a week into shooting, I was in the bathroom, and two guys from the crew walked into the bathroom. They didn't see me. And one said to the other, he said, the only reason that guy Koch got the job on this movie is because his dad's head of Paramount. And my heart sank. And I thought, wow, The other guy said, yeah, that's right, but boy, is he doing a great job. So why don't you give him a break, because he's really good at what he does. And that was the moment that, again, it was a stroke of luck for me to be in that bathroom. But what I chose to think was, damn it, I've got to work harder than anybody else, because everybody thinks that I had a silver spoon in my mouth and I just got here because of my dad. And yeah, I got the break, but I had to take that break. And
I think I must tell you, your reputation is exactly that. You have always been the guy who was there early, stayed late, and out-hustled everybody else. Okay. And your dad, and I don't think I've ever shared this with you, but I spent quite a bit of time with him doing Hollywood Wives. He admitted to me how proud he was of you in that you worked harder than he ever did. And,
really?
Oh yeah. No.
Wow.
And he said, yeah, because we were talking about kids and people we knew in common and stuff. And he said, yeah, my son is the only guy I know who has ever worked harder than I have, which I thought was a terrific thing for a father to say.
Thank you. But you know what? He never said that to me.
Isn't that funny how parents are?
Yeah. Well, that's when I'm actually writing a memoir right now. But that's one of the things that I'm talking about is that if Bob Goldenberg walked in his office, he could talk to you for 6 hours, but he never talked to me. He talked about movies, but he never shared any of that kind of stuff. So it's kind of sad.
For our audience, we should talk about Bob Goldenberg for a second.
Oh well, not really.
Yeah.
I mean, Hawk has known me for 50 years plus.
Yeah, but I mean, you look at your IMDb; it goes on for hours.
What Suzanne's referring to is my last name, and the fact that I changed it when I had a choice of either going into the Army, going to prison, or changing my name.
And we actually discussed this in another podcast.
Right. But one thing I do want to emphasize, and we've heard this in other interviews, nobody makes any progress in this business without knowing somebody, without having a little bit of a leg up. And whether it's your parents or a friend or just a mentor you find, you have to have some kind of personal relationship. And I think those relationships are key to, I call it an advantage if you like, but without somebody opening the door, the business is extremely difficult to get into.
Yes, and you've got to be at the right place at the right time or have the talent.
Right.
And again, there are, people say, well, Jesus, there's what great actors there are, and we can probably name maybe 50 that you would say, wow, these are really great actors. Well, there's 5,000 great actors out there. They just never got the break.
That's right.
And what I say when I've spoken in front of acting classes is, if you want to act, go act. You don't have to be in Hollywood and be famous to act. If acting is what you love, you can act in Madison, Wisconsin, or Oklahoma City, or Birmingham, Alabama. If you want to be famous and make a lot of money, good luck, because that's a needle in the haystack. Doesn't mean you can't, but I'll tell you just a story that you'll probably appreciate. I was executive producing a movie called Primal Fear, and Richard Gere was the star, and we were hoping to get another star to play the young boy that he interacts with. And Paramount was not going to greenlight our movie unless we had another star. And at the time, we offered Leonardo DiCaprio the part, the young boy's part. Meanwhile, Deb Aquila, our head of casting at Paramount, had looked at 2,500 young boys in their early 20s.
Well, that's a number for you.
And she called and said, there's this one boy in New York that I want to fly out and I want you to test. And there was one boy from England. And on that particular day, we were going to test both boys. And I went into the trailer and met the first one and said, welcome and good luck, and we're excited. We hear you're great. But we knew in the back of our minds we had an offer out to Leonardo DiCaprio. Well, at 9 o'clock in the morning, I got a call from Sherry Lansing, who was head of Paramount at the time, saying Leo had passed. And we're thinking, well, we'll test these kids, but they're never going to make a movie with just Richard Gere. He wasn't very hot at the time. And even though we loved the movie, we were kind of down in the dumps. And in walks this kid, and he's stumbling and stuttering a little bit. And that's kind of the role, but he was actually from West Virginia, and he was a kid from the Howlers. And he did the scene, and he was phenomenal. And Richard Gere and Gregory Howlett, the director, and I and Gary all went, whoa, who is this guy? And he did another scene and another scene, and we thought, wow, we've got something. And we took the film a few days later to Sherry, and she was very excited. She said, well, I want to see him do this, blah, 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 blah. And we had to go back, and he had to be tested a second time. And finally, Sherry said yes. And his name, as I'm sure people who saw Primal Fear would know, is Edward Norton. And as it turned out, Edward
great
Norton,
actor.
Well, but he wasn't a kid from West Virginia. He just play acted the entire time. When he met Deb Aquila in New York and all that, he was not some kid from the Howlers of West Virginia. He was a patrician kid from Columbia, Maryland, and his grandfather was a very famous man named Charles Rouse, who created and coined the word mall and built Faneuil Hall in Boston and the South Street Seaport in New York City.
Fantastic.
And his father was a U.S. attorney for the state of Maryland.
And I would have to say Ed Norton is probably one of the finest actors of this generation.
Yeah, I totally agree, and he's a good buddy. We went on to, he directed and starred in a movie that I produced for him called Keeping the Faith a few years later with he and Ben Stiller. But that was one of those, you know, if Edward Norton isn't there and Deb Aquila doesn't pick him out, he had never been in a movie before. He had gone to Yale Drama School. But if he hadn't done all that and been there on that day in New York when Deb's there, Edward Norton maybe never gets discovered, and he's just a great actor that nobody knows about.
And that's the luck factor as well of a Hollywood career.
Yeah, luck and timing.
For sure. So you're an assistant director. What happens next?
Well, I'm an assistant director, and luckily they like me. So I got to work on a lot of great movies, including The Way We Were and Chinatown. Another great movie that isn't as famous as those two, but it's called The Parallax View with Warren Beatty.
One of my favorite conspiracy pictures.
Yeah, and that's where Warren and I got to be friends. I went to work for William Castle before that, and he was a kind of a B horror movie producer who was able to get Rosemary's Baby, and so I worked on Rosemary's Baby, so I became friends with Roman, and I was there through the whole Mia Sinatra thing, which is that's a 2-hour story in itself.
High drama, right?
Yeah.
That was all over the tabloids. I mean, that was one of the biggest stories.
Yeah, and it's all true. I mean, Frank wanted her to quit the movie, and Evans showed Mia the cut film that we had at that point and said, you're going to be nominated for an Oscar. You can't leave. And she didn't, and she gave up Frank. But I must say, I mean, I'd been around Frank and Mia during that time, and they were, you know, ages apart. You know, Mia was, 20, 21, 22, and Frank was in his mid-50s, and it's one thing to have fun for a little while, but they had different agendas. So I got to do those films, and then I decided that I'd been an associate producer and assistant director on a really interesting film called The Drowning Pool. I got to work with Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward and Anthony Hopkins and Melanie Griffith at 16 years old, and then I came back and I went around town because I decided I got a job as associate producer, assistant director on a movie called Harry and Walter Go to New York with Elliot Gould and Jimmy Caan, Mark Rydell directing, and I was sitting in a room with the director, Mark Rydell, and the two producers, Harry Gittes and Don Devlin, and they were having an argument, and I straightened out the argument, and I sat down and I said, well, they're producing and directing, and I'm just the associate producer, and it's time for me to try and produce. Talk about the distinction between an associate producer and a producer. Well, a producer, if you go on, and I'd ask all of you to go to theproducersguild.org. If you go to that website, you'll see where it says, what are the criteria for getting a producer credit on a movie. And we have about 37 criteria. And that'll tell you what a producer does. And that's from starting coming up with the idea or finding the project, going online, meeting somebody, coming up with an idea, hiring the writer, hiring the director, developing the material, finding the financing, whether through an independent or through a major studio, and then mounting the movie, getting a budget, doing the pre-production, casting the film, and then the actual making of the film, the actual filming of the film, you're there through all that. And then you're there through the editing process and the marketing and distribution of the film. So you're there from beginning to end. That's what a producer does. An associate producer is basically someone who works for the producer, who does some of the work that a producer does and kind of is a producer's aide. An executive producer sometimes is someone who just is what we call line producing, who does the actual production end of the movie, and sometimes they're financiers who are given an executive producer credit. But the producer is the man, and if you look today, and I'm very proud of this because Mark Gordon and I, when we were presidents of the Producers Guild, got this accomplished when everybody said it couldn't happen. Now when you go look at movies today, you'll see a little PGA next to the name of a producer when it says produced by up on the screen. And some people have that PGA next to their name and some don't. Well, what that means is that the Producers Guild has arbitrated and has decided who actually produced the movie and who was given a credit, negotiated a credit, but really didn't do a majority of the producing functions. And so when an Oscar is given out, or a Producers Guild, or a BAFTA, or a Golden Globe, only the people that got the little PGA next to their name get the awards. And it's like the good housekeeping seal of approval. Doesn't mean that you're a member of the Producers Guild. It just means that you in fact did the job.
That was a real uphill battle, getting that distinction.
15 years it took Mark and I, and we did it, and all the studios signed on, and most of the independents have signed on, and now every time you go to the movie theater, you're going to see that PGA, and you're going to, for your listeners, you're going to hear, you're going to know the answer as to why that mark is there.
Because prior to that phenomenal change, I recall seeing films and television shows where literally the actor's girlfriend would get a producer's credit. That's
why we changed it. So I was very proud. That's probably from a business standpoint, that's the most proud thing that Mark and I devised a plan and went to every studio.
It suddenly creates enormous intrinsic and genuine value in the credit of producer.
Yeah. Right. Well, everybody knows if it says written by, oh, that guy wrote it.
Yeah.
If it says starring Tom Hanks, oh, Tom Hanks starred in it. But producer is there's so many gray areas to who a producer is that we wanted to make sure, and I believe now the respect for the producer is back in Hollywood, like it wasn't before.
So tell us a little bit about, you had worked with Warren Beatty on Parallax View.
Which, by the way, is Bob's idol, or was.
Well, he's just been a great actor.
Come on, you can admit it.
I'm not a fan of a movie star, but he strikes me as an incredibly bright guy.
He's as smart as an individual as I've ever met.
Right. So how did Heaven Can Wait come about, and your involvement with that? You have a fabulous story about that on your website, which we will send our listeners to. But why don't you tell us a little bit about how that movie came to pass?
Well, I had started producing, and I got a call from Warren, and we sat down in a little bar at the Beverly Wilshire. I used to live at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, a little bar called The Hideaway, and we sat there, and he talked to me about this movie and why he wanted to make it. And I knew the old movie Here Comes Mr. Jordan. That's the other thing that we were lucky enough to do, Bob. I think in Suzanne, I don't know if you were doing this, but Channel 9 in Los Angeles used to have something called $1 Million Movie.
Right.
Sure.
And it was on almost every day and every night, and especially Saturday mornings. And I don't know why, but I was an early riser, and I'd always watch great old movies. So I really knew my movies. And when he said, "Here comes Mr. Jordan," he knew I loved sports. And he asked me if I could exec produce and assistant direct him, because he was going to direct his first movie as a director. Now, I had worked for several first-time directors before. I had worked for Paul Mazursky on his first movie, Bob Carroll, Ted and Alice. And I had worked for Robert Benton, who went on to do Kramer versus Kramer and Places in the Heart, on a movie that he did called Bad Company with a young actor named Jeff Bridges at the time. And so he knew I had worked with first-time directors. So I read the script, and I loved it. And he said, well, how are we going to be able to do all this football, and how are we going to put together the Super Bowl? Well, I said, we have to do it real. If it's not real, if we don't see you in the huddle coming out to this, everybody will think, oh, it's just somebody else playing that part. We've got to be tight on you and pull back and see everybody in the stands. And Warren said, yeah, so how are we going to do that? And I said, well, we're going to have to do it at halftime of the football game, and we'll have 14 minutes to do it. And
so at that time, did you really think you had a chance of doing that? At halftime is such a big event.
Actually, yes. That's how I thought we would have to do it and be able to see everybody in the stands. And I said, I'll go to Carol Rosenblum, who was the owner of the Rams at that time, and the Rams were the pro football team. And then he helped me get to Pete Rozelle, him meaning Carol Rosenblum. And it was an exhibition game. It wasn't a regular season game. And so they gave us permission. And Carol Rosenblum put me in touch with his general manager, a guy named Jack Teal. And as we're getting ready to do this, Jack was calling me all the time saying, now, we always put in a great halftime show, and the fans always love it. And so you sure you're going to give us a great halftime show? I said, oh, don't worry, Jack, it'll be great. But meanwhile, I'm scared that, they're going to get upset. We're getting all ready, and I thought, it's just the night before, I don't know why, sometimes it just comes to you. I said, let's get the announcer to say, and this is what he said as the halftime gun went off. He said, don't go away, fans, because tonight at halftime, the Rams are going to win the Super Bowl, and Warren Beatty's going to be the quarterback to play it. And everybody stayed at halftime and cheered, and we did the whole sequence. We did about, 10, 12 different plays in that 14 minutes. We had 6 cameras, and it was fantastic. I mean, we got everything we needed. And afterwards, Jack Teal came down in the second half, and I said, well, Jack, seemed like you guys got a great halftime show. And he said, that was the worst halftime we've ever had.
No.
They didn't sell it.
And I thought, what? What are you talking about? The fans loved it. He said, yeah, they loved it. Nobody went out and bought hot dogs.
Right.
It was the worst concessions tonight we ever had because everybody stayed to watch the halftime show.
Yeah, well, you guys had different objectives, no doubt.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Well, he told me he wanted entertainment. I gave him entertainment.
That's fabulous. That's fabulous.
Well, I have to say that movie, for me personally, ranks in the top 50, and I have 50 really good ones.
I hope Chinatown's in there, too.
Yes, it is. But I have to tell you, you were so right about when the camera zoomed in on the character of Warren Beatty. I remember being so shocked and pleasantly surprised that when he turned towards the camera, it was really Warren Beatty. That made the whole movie so real to me.
And this is in the day. This is in the days before computer graphics would have just put his face in the helmet.
Oh yeah, or we could have put all the people in the stands. We didn't have any of that then.
Right.
And what we did have in those days where we did a lot of zoom lenses. So I was able to be very tight on Warren as he broke the huddle, and then as he came out of the huddle and up to the line of scrimmage, we pulled back, and you saw the whole game, and you saw all the fans in the stands, and then we did we copied the Immaculate Reception of Franco Harris many years before, and that's how Warren gets to run down the field.
There was just something about that scene, because for me, I'm a little younger than you two, not much, so I don't remember seeing the original movie, but for this movie, you really had to go along, you really had to accept the premise, and for me, it really sealed it when I actually saw Warren Beatty on that football field.
Well, the original movie, Here Comes Mr. Jordan, he was a prize fighter.
Right.
So it was a different, he turns out to be a different prize fighter at the end, but that was one of my most fun movies to make because I love sports and I love putting all the football together.
And as an executive producer on pictures like that, how involved are you in the development of the script? Because you're working with some pretty powerful guys like Buck Henry.
Later in my career, I became much more involved in developing, but I was there when Warren was working with Buck and with Elaine May, and we kept going back to we went into the projection room and always watched Here Comes Mr. Jordan and said, why is that working and why is that working and how do we you know.
No, because there is the conceit, and the audience has to buy into the whole premise seamlessly.
Well, there's the moment that had to work, and it's the key moment in the film is when Warren wakes up in the bathtub in the bathroom of the very wealthy Leo Farnsworth.
Right.
And he's there with Mr. Jordan, with James Mason. And he looks in a mirror and says, "But Mr. Jordan, I still look like Joe Pendleton." And it's James Mason's line that the audience must buy. And what he says is, "To you, Joe, you'll always look like Joe. But to everybody else in the world, you're Leo Farnsworth."
Inwardly, you haven't changed. You're still Joe Pendleton. That's what you and I see. But outwardly, you're Leo Farnsworth, and that's what everyone else will see.
Mr. Farnsworth.
It works. Of course.
And if you buy that, then the rest of the movie works.
And you buy practically anything James Mason says.
Exactly. There you go. You know your stuff, Bob.
Yeah. So you went from working as an executive producer. This is back in the late 70s, and your credits thereafter are just kind of astonishing. From The Idol Maker to Gorky Park to The Pope of Greenwich Village. These are classics in American cinema.
Oh, thank you. Well,
and that brings us to another classic, one of my favorites, Wayne's World.
That was again a stroke of luck.
Did you know what an iconic film it was going to become?
Gary Lucchese, who was head of Paramount at the time, had been an executive at TriStar Pictures in the early 80s. And in the early 80s, I had become president of a big major production company called Raystar. And we made Peggy Sue Got Married and Nothing in Common and The Secret of My Success. Those were very big movies in those years. And Gary had now become head of Paramount, and he had asked me to come over, and so I had a deal at Paramount. Gary called me and said, "I want you to meet Lorne Michaels because we need a real Hollywood producer to do this movie with Lorne." So I met with Lorne, and I called my kids, and I said, "Hey, guys, they want me to do this movie, Wayne's World." And all three of them said, "Dad, you got to do it. You got to. Oh, Wayne's World's the funniest thing on Saturday Night Live. Oh, man, I can't. Oh, please, will you bring me to the set?" I went ahead, and as we were making the movie, I'll never forget, it was about 2 weeks before shooting, and my son Billy, who's now has just graduated Northwestern in radio, television, film, and he's been on a few of my sets, like I had been on my father's sets. He is now not just a production assistant, he's what is known as the key set PA. He's going to work with me on Wayne's World. And he comes back, he said, "Oh, Dad, I was just in rehearsal. The funniest thing, have you ever heard of this group Queen?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, my God." He said, "They're pretending they're in the car, and they're playing this song, and they're bobbing their heads. Dad, it's going to be hysterical."
And he was right.
And boy, was he right.
This is my best friend, Garth Elgar. I think we'll go with a little Bohemian Rhapsody, gentlemen.
Good call.
I see a little silhouette of a man.
Scaramouche, will you do the fandango? Thunderbolts and lightning, very, very frightening me. Galileo.
Galileo. Figaro.
That scene is a classic.
That's definitely, yeah.
And then I have to give a little credit to my other son, Robbie, who was 12 or 13. We're shooting a scene where Terminator 2 had just come out, and if you remember, there's a scene where he's pulled over. Wayne is pulled over in his blue car by the cop from Terminator.
Right.
Robert Patrick. And he walks up to we're shooting a night out in, I don't know, Glendale or somewhere, and "You were driving too fast," or something like that. And Robbie, who's on the set that night, he's 13, is standing next to me and the director, Penelope Spheris, and you can hear Mike Myers can hear him, and Robbie goes, "Well, that's not funny."
Oh.
And I'm going, "Oh, my God, my son, what am I going to do?" And Mike Myers looked from inside the car and says, "Well, what do you mean, Robbie?" And he said, "Well, in Terminator 2, he held up a Polaroid picture of a boy and said, 'Have you seen this boy?' And that's going to be funny to everybody who's just seen, because Terminator just came out." And Mike said, "He's right. Take a picture of Robbie in a Polaroid."
Oh, funny.
And if you see the movie, Robbie is very proud that the Polaroid picture that Robert Patrick brings up is a picture of him.
Love it.
Fantastic. Well, that's kind of a tribute to the director being flexible as well.
Those kind of movies, Airplane, Wayne's World,
you have to be flexible.
Dumb and Dumber. You got to be quick on your feet.
Yeah, if you get too nailed down to the script, when things are actually happening in front of you, you can miss some opportunities.
Well, that's not just in comedy. That's kind of an overall thing that's happened. Sometimes mistakes or things that happen just because you had to turn out to be wonderful. Sidney Pollack, who was a dear friend of mine, for my 60th birthday, my wife was unbeknownst to me, was going around to all the people I had worked with and asking if they could tell something about me. And she went to Sidney's office, and Sidney, the way it's quoted in this little film that she put together, said, yeah, he said, you remember when we were shooting that end scene and the way we were out in front of the Plaza Hotel, and everybody used to ask me, Sidney, how did you know to shoot a low angle on Barbara and Bob when they got together and Barbara's there, and my God, it was just so smart to shoot this low angle. And you and I knew that the city of New York wouldn't give us permission to block out all the streets, so they all had modern cars, and this is supposed to be 1952. So we had to shoot up. We couldn't shoot straight. But everybody thought I was a brilliant director because I shot a low angle.
Funny. Yeah, the things you can be pushed into can
exactly.
look
Sometimes work out for the best.
So just a philosophical question. You've been in the business for quite some time. What do you think?
50 years, buddy.
How many?
50.
I'm not that old.
Yeah, me either. I must have started when I was 2.
What do you think is the biggest change that's taken place in the business over the last several decades?
Cable and television has gotten much better than it was. I think that a lot of the movies that we loved, the Chinatowns and the Marathon Mans and that kind of stuff, they're harder and harder and harder to get made today as big studio movies. And those are being made as either independents on a much smaller budget, or being made for HBO or Showtime, or look at True Detective, or they're being made on Netflix. Look at House of Cards. That and some of the great directors who are still doing movies, David Fincher or Steven Soderbergh, or a lot of these great directors and producers are going into television. Mark Johnson was doing Breaking Bad, and Mark Gordon, who's my pal, Criminal Minds and Grey's Anatomy.
So what do you think, given the excellence of television programming as it's evolving, because I agree with you. I mean, Breaking Bad to me was as good as any feature I've ever seen. Orange is the New Black, all that stuff.
Yeah.
What do you think the future is of theatrical exhibition?
Well, boy, do I wish I knew. I'm on the board of AMC Theaters. But what I was going to say about movies is I think we've dumbed down the audience. And what I mean by that is our young audience loves the tentpoles, the Batmans and the Supermans and the Spider-Mans and
all the Avengers stuff.
The Avengers and Furious 7, Fast and Furious, that they're not really aware of the films that we used to love. Let's take 1967, Bonnie and Clyde, In the Heat of the Night, or
Chinatown.
Chinatown, or To Kill a Mockingbird. Those films aren't the ones that are happening anymore as movies. And there are a few. I'm not saying it's always or never, but it's much harder to get those films made because the studios have been taken over by corporations. So it's all about the bottom line. In the old days, a studio head like Robert Evans, if he was, to make 15 movies, maybe 10, 11 of them made financial sense, and he could talk Gulf and Western, the company that owned Paramount, into making those pretty easily. But there were 4 or 5 others that, in his gut, he said, "I want to make this movie, even though it's a risk." Today, that doesn't happen, but in those days, that's how Love Story and Godfather and Chinatown and Marathon Man got made, because Bob pushed the studio to make those films. Today, it would be incredibly hard to make Godfather today or Chinatown today as a feature. They made Boardwalk Empire. Hey, as an HBO.
Right, exactly.
That's the change today, and today most of the studios are doing what I'll call family fare, and there's nothing wrong with it. And when you see what Furious 7's doing and what Avengers is going to do this weekend, you can't get mad at it. And
it's hard. It's hard to argue with that
success. And the other thing that's happening is, up until, believe it or not, Star Wars, 1977, sound had not changed since sound came in. There were some speakers, and you listened, and it came out through the front of the screen, and it was George Lucas and something called THX. We now have lay-down seats like you're seeing it in your own den, and we have dine-in theaters where you can actually order a meal and sit and have your dinner and have a glass of wine and watch a movie.
Yeah, you're creating an experience. I understand.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So
now, before we let you go, I have to ask you, you have, looking at your credits here, you have worked with so many incredible actors, and I would like to go down this small list I have, and can you just tell us in a word or two what your impressions were of them? Warren Beatty.
Totally driven, smart, knows what he wants. Just takes him a long time to make up his mind.
My favorite, Jack Nicholson.
Just natural talent, absolutely natural talent. He just has it all. A really fun guy to be around.
Dustin Hoffman.
Again, really, really smart, and sometimes too smart for his own good. Sometimes he gets in too much detail, and his talent is so great. Let him just go with it.
Faye Dunaway.
Again, super talented, but quite insecure.
Paul Newman.
The most fun major star I ever worked with.
Oh, really?
Just a blast. Loved practical jokes, had so much fun, and was just a natural.
And what about Joanne Woodward?
She was also super talented, and I always used to, when Paul would do something kind of crass and funny or whatever, she'd just go, "Oh, Paul, grow up." And she'd be sitting there doing her knitting, but both of them were brilliant actors.
Barbara Streisand?
A perfectionist who, she wants to do it her way, and great at it. I was so happy that she said yes to me when I was head of the Academy, and she sang it The Way We Were after Marvin Hamlish died in the In Memoriam.
May be beautiful and yet what's too painful.
One of my favorites, I think he was very underrated. He was in The Way We Were, James Woods.
Jimmy Woods, that was his first movie.
Yeah.
Jimmy's, he's a really good guy and a really good actor, but really, really fine actor. I
do want to ask you about your tenure as president of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences and how that came about, and how fulfilling was that for you? Because your profile, following in your father's footsteps, is one thing, but you kind of ascend into the pantheon of Hollywood legend when you take on that role.
Well, first of all, I loved it. I had worked for the Academy for many years. I'd been on committees, and then I had been a governor of the Academy, and obviously because kind of like my, learning from my dad when I was a little kid, when he produced 10 Oscar shows, and he had been on the board for years, I always knew what was going on, and I was, in the 10 Oscar shows that he produced, I was always backstage helping him, So I knew, and I knew what I wanted, and I loved the Academy, and I loved giving back to the industry. So I was so proud. I mean, I can't even tell you about that night when the Board of Governors elects the president from the Board of Governors, and when they elected me, I couldn't have been prouder in my life, and I had the best year being president. It was just so much fun, and I got to make a lot of things that I had wanted to put into works at the Academy. I was able to put into works, and there's now legacy. They're moving on, and they're loving it.
Well, I must tell you, I'm sure that your dad was looking down on that night too, and is more proud than you can imagine, as are all of the mutual friends that we have. There are not many kids that came out of Horace Mann and Beverly High whom everybody respects as much as they do you. And I must tell you...
That's so sweet of you, Bob. I really enjoyed this, and I hope it works for you guys. And we'll talk, I'll call you back, or we can talk in the next few days.
Absolutely.
All the best.
Thanks.
Bye.
That was awesome. I think Hawk has more stories than I do.
Well, I was going to say we could easily use another hour or two with him. He has worked with so many people and done so many pictures.
And what you really feel in talking to him is his passion for the business. He really is a creative guy.
You know, he worked with two stars that you really, really liked, Warren Beatty and Julie Christie.
That's true.
You were hot for her.
Well, who wasn't? Come on.
And actually, she also was in one of my favorite movies, Shampoo, with him.
That's right. That's right.
So I think there was something there between those two.
You think? I think there was something between Warren Beatty and just about
everybody
actress he worked with.
He had quite the reputation, didn't he?
But as you heard Hawk say, he was also brilliant.
And very professional.
And very professional. And I think it really comes through. And I think Hawk's professionalism comes through in everything he says. I'm so impressed by his passion. That's all I can say. So listen, before we leave today, I want to remind everybody to go to our website at wherehollywoodhides.com and check out our new hardcover book, Where Hollywood Hides.
Celebrities in Paradise.
Right. It's a great collector's item and makes a wonderful gift.
And that book is soon going to come out in softcover as well. We'll let you know when that happens.
Another of our great sponsors you really should check out is 1-800-Flowers.com. Go to our...
Oh, yes, flowers.com. That's
right.
A great idea.
1-800-Flowers.com has a banner on our website, and they are the preeminent floral delivery, really nationwide. Great value, great service.
And I think you have something to read off.
Well, I do want to thank those people who have accepted our invitation to give us some likes on our Facebook page and those great iTunes reviews. People like William Malring, Larry Collins, Lindy Hellman Kitcher, Irasima Avalar de Brito, Adrian Rennie, Joel Hewlett, Kathy Ireland, Laura Haldane, and Tony Cortez were kind enough to visit our Facebook page and give us those great reviews on iTunes.
Thank you so much.
They really do help the cause. Until next time, this is Bob McCullough.
And this is Suzanne Herrera McCullough. We'll see you at the movies. And today's music is provided by Chance McCullough. You can find more of his original soundtracks at chancemccullough.com.
From Chilicombes and Paducas with their bazookas to get their names up in lights.
All armed with photos from local rotos with their hair in ribbons and legs in tights. Hooray for Hollywood! You have no way of knowing who'll make good.
Maybe you'll be another Papa Dion, your name in neon. If you get lucky, you could. Yes, buddy, you'll arrive if you can top his fire. Hooray for Hollywood!
Hooray for Hollywood!